When they described it as the place where the gods were born.
Yeah.
And they found it.
Syria's longest river has receded, parching trees and leaving families of local farmers without water to drink.
Now we look at an unexpected result of climate change and drought. As the water recedes, some of the world's forgotten histories are being revealed.
Do you understand what the Euphrates represents? It appears in Genesis at the beginning of the story. It appears again in Revelation near the end. A river connected to both origin and conclusion. And just 5 minutes ago, something significant unfolded along its banks. Stay with this journey, because what we are about to explore might change how you interpret the season we are living in. Along the banks of the Euphrates River, something unexpected began to appear. At first, it did not look dramatic. There were no explosions of earth, no sudden collapse, just water pulling back, slowly, steadily, revealing stretches of riverbed that had not seen sunlight in generations. Cracked mud replaced moving current. Fishing boats leaned sideways, stranded where deep water once flowed. But as researchers and locals stepped onto the exposed ground, they realized this was more than dried earth. Shapes began to emerge. Not random stones, not scattered debris. Beneath layers of silt, sharp edges broke the surface. Corners, straight lines, blocks that looked deliberately cut. The longer they brushed away the mud, the clearer it became. These were not natural formations shaped by current and time. They were geometric. A drone was sent up for a wider view. From above, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Rectangular outlines, aligned foundations, a symmetry that rivers do not create. What seemed like scattered stone from the ground formed something intentional from the sky. A layout, structured and measured. The feeling shifted. This was no longer just a drought story. It was the first sign that something constructed, something built by human hands long ago, had been resting silently beneath the water. Was this the wall of an ancient city, the foundation of a forgotten temple, or a structure never recorded in surviving texts? Stay connected, because if this is the first wave, the next ones may move even faster. The discovery did not happen all at once. For days, researchers had been mapping the exposed stone structures along the dry stretches of the Euphrates River. The geometric foundations had already shifted the mood from curiosity to seriousness. Something ancient had been there. Something built. Then, during a routine sweep near one of the newly revealed stone outlines, a team noticed an unusual form, partially buried in hardened mud. At first, it looked like debris, perhaps part of a collapsed pillar or broken statue. Its surface was coated in layers of dried silt, blending almost perfectly with the earth around it. But the shape felt different, too curved in some places, too proportioned. They began clearing it carefully. As the mud fell away, a contour appeared that made everyone step back. It resembled a human figure. Not clearly, not perfectly, but unmistakably enough to stop the conversation. A torso-like structure. A head-shaped upper mass. Elongated extensions where arms might have been. It was larger than an average person, noticeably so, yet not distorted in the way erosion usually reshapes stone. The surface was smooth, unnaturally smooth. There were no visible tool marks at first glance, no obvious cracks like those found in statues exposed to centuries of pressure and water flow. It did not look like driftwood. It did not resemble any known aquatic formation. and it did not match the broken architectural stones found nearby. Measurements were taken. Standing beside it, one researcher barely reached the midpoint of its height. The proportions were balanced, not exaggerated like mythic carvings, not crude like unfinished stonework. If it was a statue, it was unlike typical Mesopotamian figures, which are usually smaller and distinctly stylized. This one felt restrained. The tension did not come from fear, it came from ambiguity. For centuries, the Euphrates concealed entire civilizations beneath its current. Now, as the water retreats, the river is not simply exposing walls and foundations, it is revealing forms that look back at us. And if this humanoid shape is only the first of its kind to emerge from the mud, then the question deepens. Was this figure meant to stand above the city that once thrived here? Or was it never meant to be seen again at all? Before we continue, if you want real-time updates as new developments surface, then subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what comes next. The discovery of the humanoid form changed the tone of the expedition, but what came next made everything heavier. Not far from the geometric foundations, in a lower stretch of the exposed Euphrates River bed, where the mud had dried into hardened layers, a field assistant noticed fragments scattered across the surface. At first glance, they looked like pale stones mixed into the brown sediment. They were not stones. Careful brushing revealed curves, hollow sections, porous texture, bone. The team slowed down immediately. Every step became deliberate. The area was marked. The surface cleared centimeter by centimeter. What had appeared random began to form a pattern, connected pieces emerging from the same layer of compacted silt. A partial rib structure surfaced first, then long bones, aligned, not scattered by current. The shape suggested placement, not drift. The remains were not tangled as if carried by rushing water. They rested in position, as though time had folded gently over them. The silence along the riverbank deepened. This was no longer about speculation. Fragments continued to appear in nearby patches. Smaller bones, splintered pieces, sections too eroded to identify at first glance. The layer in which they were embedded suggested significant age. These were not recent burials. They belonged to a distant period, sealed beneath centuries of river movement. Local workers standing at the edge of the site began whispering about old stories, legends of ancient peoples, of forgotten conflicts, of beings described in exaggerated proportions. The research team did not engage the rumors. They focused on documentation, soil analysis, careful extraction. Yet the atmosphere had shifted. Walls and foundations speak of civilization, but bones speak of life and of endings. What made this moment especially weighty was the proximity. The remains were found near both the structured foundations and the humanoid-shaped object. Whether coincidence or connection, the geography tightened the mystery. If this was once a settlement, who were its people? If this was a ceremonial site, what took place here? The Euphrates has carried the memory of empires, Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, layering their stories beneath water and time. Now, as the river withdraws, it is not dramatically upheaving the past. It is unveiling it quietly, and with each layer removed, we are no longer uncovering structures or shapes. We are uncovering what remains. The bones were not the final layer. Beyond the excavation site, farther down the exposed stretch of the Euphrates River, where the mud thickened and hardened into dark ridges, something long and curved interrupted the flat horizon of the riverbed. At first, it looked like a fallen tree trunk, but trees do not rest half-buried in symmetrical lines. As the team approached, the outline became clearer. Wooden beams, unaligned in parallel. a rib-like frame arching upward from the mud. Sections splintered but still structured. This was not debris carried by floodwaters. It was a hull. Careful brushing began again. Layer by layer, compacted sediment gave way to preserved timber. The wood was darkened by centuries underwater, hardened yet fragile. Peg joints were still visible in places, evidence of craftsmanship rather than natural formation. A ship had been resting here, not wrecked violently, not shattered by impact. It lay tilted on one side, as though the river had slowly lowered it into sleep. The surrounding mud had sealed it, protecting parts of its structure from complete decay. Measurements suggested a vessel larger than a simple fishing boat. Its width and depth hinted at cargo capacity. Trade, perhaps. Transport along ancient Mesopotamian routes when the Euphrates was a living highway of civilization. This discovery shifted the atmosphere once again. Walls speak of settlement. Bones speak of life and loss. But a ship speaks of movement. Who built it? What did it carry? Grain, stone, artifacts, people? The river that once carried merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims had now stepped aside, revealing one of its own memories. The vessel did not appear scattered as if destroyed in a sudden catastrophe. It seemed stranded, caught as water levels changed long ago, then buried by silt as centuries passed. Standing beside the exposed frame, the scale became undeniable. A person walking along its length looked small against its curved ribs. The craftsmanship was intentional, balanced, engineered for stability in strong currents. And now it rests in silence. If this ship traveled these waters, then this stretch of the Euphrates was once deep, powerful, alive with passage. The river was not only a boundary of empires, it was their lifeline, which raises a deeper question. If one vessel is emerging now, how many more lie sealed beneath layers that have yet to crack open? The Euphrates is not simply drying. It is revealing chapters of commerce, migration, and forgotten journeys. What once sank quietly beneath shifting currents is returning to light, not in fragments, but in form. The hull stands as proof. This river carried more than water. It carried history, and history, once submerged, is beginning to breathe again. If what you're hearing right now feels significant, if you sense that this moment carries more weight than a normal headline, then do this. Press the like button. Not for the algorithm, not for the channel. But so, this conversation reaches people who are still distracted, still scrolling, still unaware of what may be unfolding in real time. Millions are focused on everything except the signs happening in front of them. Help bring attention to it. Because whether you see this as coincidence, symbolism, or something greater, one thing is clear. The Euphrates is no longer just a river in an ancient text. It's part of the conversation now. The ship was not the deepest secret the river held. After mapping the exposed hull and surrounding foundations, the team expanded their survey outward, toward a stretch of hardened ground where the mud had dried into layered stone-like shelves. This area felt different, less disturbed, as if it had been sealed longer than the rest. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. The scans revealed an anomaly beneath the surface, a flat, dense shape buried several feet below the compacted sediment. Too uniform to be natural, too deliberate in its symmetry. Careful excavation began. Hours passed before the edge appeared. It was stone. Not a broken fragment like those found near the foundations, but a single slab, rectangular, thick, and intentionally shaped. Unlike the surrounding construction stones, this piece was isolated, embedded deeper, as if it had been placed and then covered. When the upper layer of mud was cleared, markings began to show. Carvings. Not random scratches from erosion, but controlled incisions. Lines intersecting at angles, repeating patterns, symbols arranged in measured spacing. The grooves were still sharp in places, protected by centuries beneath the riverbed. The atmosphere shifted again. This was not architecture, not bone, not a vessel. This was communication, and the symbols did not immediately resemble common Mesopotamian cuneiform. They were structured but unfamiliar. Some resembled celestial patterns. Others looked like boundary markers or warnings. There was repetition, suggesting intention rather than decoration. The slab had not drifted here. It had been buried deliberately. Why? Was it once part of a larger structure now lost to erosion? A marker placed at the edge of a sacred site? A record meant to endure beneath water rather than above it? The timing made the moment heavier. The Euphrates withdraws. Foundations rise. A humanoid form emerges. Bones surface. A ship returns to light. And now, from beneath them all, a message carved into stone. Scripture often speaks of the earth revealing what it holds when the appointed time arrives. Hidden things uncovered not by force, but by exposure. Not created in the present, but revealed in it. This slab did not announce itself. It did not offer translation. It simply waited. And now, with the river pulling back further each week, the question grows sharper. Was this meant to be found by those who built here long ago, or by us? The Euphrates is no longer just uncovering structures of the past. It is uncovering intention. And whatever lies beneath the remaining layers may not just tell us how these people lived, but why they left something behind to be discovered when the water finally stepped aside. By the time the stone slab had been documented, the expedition had already shifted from curiosity to vigilance. Every new section of exposed ground along the Euphrates River was no longer just terrain, it was potential revelation. It happened near dusk. The riverbed, cracked and silent, stretched wide under a fading orange sky. Researchers were packing equipment when one of the drone operators noticed something unusual on the live feed. Not in the sky, but on the ground. A pattern. At first, it looked like shadows cast by uneven ridges of dried mud, but the lines were too straight, too balanced. Two long impressions intersecting at a near-perfect angle, carved shallowly into the hardened sediment. The team walked toward it. From ground level, the formation became clearer. The intersecting lines were not random cracks caused by drought. The edges were defined, measured, deliberate. The surface around them had eroded naturally, but these grooves held their shape. It was not a structure rising above the earth. It was a symbol pressed into it. No surrounding foundation, no collapsed wall, just the mark itself, subtle, quiet, almost easy to miss unless seen from above. The proportions were strikingly symmetrical, not ornate, not decorative. Intentional in its simplicity. There was no dramatic wind, no tremor beneath their feet. The air was still. What made the moment heavy was not spectacle, it was placement. The marking sat between the exposed shipwreck and the earlier foundation site, as though positioned along a line connecting previous discoveries. Whether coincidence or design, its location felt precise. They brushed the grooves gently. The sediment within them was denser than the surrounding soil, suggesting the carving had been made before the area was submerged and sealed by centuries of river flow. This was not a crack formed yesterday. It had waited beneath water. Scripture often speaks of signs not only in the heavens, but in the earth. Markers set in place long before the generation meant to see them. Not always loud, not always accompanied by explanation. Simply present, appearing when conditions allow. The symbol did not demand interpretation. It did not glow, it did not move. It remained steady and silent against the vast emptiness of the dried riverbed. And that silence carried weight. If walls reveal settlement, bones reveal mortality. Ships reveal movement, and carved slabs reveal message. What does a symbol alone reveal? Why place it here, away from central architecture yet aligned with the path of discovery? As twilight deepened, the drone captured one final overhead image. From above, the marking stood out clearly against the pale earth. Balanced, unmistakable. The Euphrates continues to withdraw, and now it is not only uncovering objects of the past, it is uncovering signs, quiet, grounded, and waiting for those who are paying attention. Across parts of the Middle East, near deserts, river valleys, and small towns scattered between ancient trade routes, residents have begun describing something difficult to explain. It is not what they see, it is what they no longer hear. In villages not far from the Euphrates River, in open stretches of land where wind usually moves freely across sand and stone, entire areas have fallen into sudden silence. No insects, no distant engines, no animals shifting in the brush. Even the wind seems to pause. The stillness does not feel peaceful. It feels suspended. Witnesses say it arrives without warning. One moment, the environment hums with ordinary life, the faint rustle of dry grass, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, the low rhythm of movement carried across open land. The next moment, everything stops. Not gradually, all at once. People step outside expecting the usual desert sounds, only to find the air empty. The silence feels dense, almost physical, pressing against the ears. Conversations lower naturally, movements slow. Then, just as suddenly, the sounds return. Wind resumes. Birds call. Life continues. But the memory lingers. Environmental explanations are offered. Temperature inversions, atmospheric pressure shifts, acoustic anomalies across flat terrain. And yet those who experience it insist the disturbance is not the absence of sound alone. It is the sensation that accompanies it. Attention, as if the land itself is holding its breath. In Scripture, silence is rarely meaningless. It is often described as the pause before something significant unfolds, before revelation, before change, before events that alter the direction of history. There is even a passage describing silence in heaven, not as an end, but as a threshold moment. Silence, in biblical language, is not emptiness. It is anticipation. What makes these reports in the Middle East especially striking is their context. They are occurring in a region already marked by exposed ruins, shifting ground, drying waterways, and rediscovered relics. Ancient landscapes are reappearing. Buried histories are surfacing. And now, the air itself grows still. When creation quiets unexpectedly, it commands attention. Not through force, not through spectacle, but through interruption. The absence of noise becomes the message. So what does it mean when wind halts over desert plains? When even the smallest living sounds withdraw at once? When a region layered with thousands of years of history falls into sudden stillness? The Bible suggests that silence is not comfort. It is a signal, a measured pause, a space granted for reflection before movement begins again. If sound is the pulse of life across the land, then its abrupt disappearance raises a question no one can easily dismiss. Is this region being given a quiet moment to listen before whatever comes next breaks the silence? Joe Rogan has often challenged listeners to question mainstream narratives, to think independently, to pay attention to what others dismiss. In many ways, that mirrors a biblical theme. Not everyone perceives what is happening in front of them. In Matthew 13:16, Jesus says, "Blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear." Throughout history, there have always been people who miss the moment because they were distracted by normal life. Jesus also warned in Matthew 24:37-39 that in the days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, marrying, life as usual, unaware of what was building around them. The danger was not ignorance of information, it was distraction. The people who gathered along the Euphrates at 4:07 responded to something. They felt a pull strong enough to get out of bed before dawn. They sensed that something required their attention. What about you? Are you paying attention to the shifts happening globally? Are you watching the patterns or are you scrolling past them? Are you open to the possibility that symbolic locations like the Euphrates carry meaning beyond environmental headlines? This is where knowledge becomes responsibility. You can study prophecy. You can analyze geopolitics. You can listen to every podcast and still remain unchanged. Information without response leads nowhere. Scripture urges self-examination. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, "Examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves." That principle applies beyond doctrine. It applies to awareness, to spiritual alertness, to readiness. Revelation 3:15-16 warns about spiritual complacency, being neither hot nor cold. Indifference is more dangerous than opposition. Comfort dulls perception. Joe Rogan often speaks about becoming more conscious, less passive, less controlled by noise. In biblical language, that's becoming a watchman. Ezekiel 3:17 describes a watchman as someone who hears and then warns others, someone awake while others sleep. We are living in a time of acceleration, technologically, politically, environmentally, spiritually. The Euphrates drying, the gathering at 4:07, the surge in global attention. These are not isolated fragments. They are signals within a larger pattern. The real question is not whether something happened along the Euphrates. The real question is whether you are awake enough to recognize the season. Will you stay passive, or will you watch closely? Because history shows that the ones who are prepared are not the loudest. They are the most attentive. Don't let this video end and then immediately move on to the next distraction. If what happened at the Euphrates stirred something in you, send this to someone else. Share it with your family. Share it with your friends. Share it with people who need to start paying attention. Romans 10:14 asks a powerful question. How can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone telling them? You don't need a pulpit. You don't need a platform with millions of followers. You just need the willingness to speak. You can be the one who starts the conversation. You can be the one who says, "Have you seen what's happening along the Euphrates?" Now, before we close, there's one more layer to this. In John 17:20-23, Jesus prayed that believers would be one so that the world would believe. Unity becomes evidence. Unity becomes testimony. When division pauses and people stand side by side in humility, it carries weight. What happened along the Euphrates wasn't about winning arguments. It wasn't about proving one tradition right over another. It was about awareness, about recognizing that something significant may be unfolding. So here's the question. Will you be part of the noise or part of the awareness? Will you cling to pride, labels, and endless debates? Or will you pursue truth with humility, even if it challenges your assumptions? Because this moment isn't about being right. It's about being ready. 1 Thessalonians 5:1-6 reminds us that the day of the Lord comes like a thief in the night. Yet people will say, peace and safety, and then sudden change will follow. But it also says believers are not in darkness. They are children of the light. The instruction is simple. Stay awake, stay sober, stay alert. The signs are not hidden. The Euphrates is not just a river in an ancient story. It is active in our headlines, in our discussions, in our timelines. So ask yourself, are you awake? Are you paying attention? Are you spiritually alert in a season of acceleration? If you made it to the end of this video, type in the comments, I am watching. Let's build a community of people who stay alert, who don't panic, but also don't ignore, who observe, who think, who prepare, and subscribe. Because this story is still unfolding. What happened at 407 along the Euphrates may only be the first chapter. Stay tuned, stay awake, stay ready. Because whatever this moment represents, it's not the end of the conversation. It may be the beginning.
Local researchers believe they have cracked a mystery surrounding an extraordinary discovery, and it's right off of our...
Oh, that's like untouched 2,000-year-old stuff.
Exactly.
Do you see that spider?
The problem.
Satellite data confirms the dramatic retreat of the Euphrates River. But the greater mystery is what the water revealed, a hollow chamber leading into an ancient tunnel network. Deep inside are not scattered ruins, but a carved temple. Archaeologists report that under ultraviolet light, symbols appear on the walls, depicting four winged figures marked with a chilling warning. Guardians below must not be disturbed. Scholars say it is not only archaeology. Locals say what remains buried begins to emerge. If this place wasn't built for worship, but to store something until a specific time, how would we know when that time had come? Could that generation be ours? Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video so it can reach more people to join our discussion. As the Euphrates River keeps pulling back, long cracks spread across the dry riverbed. From the broken earth, something dark begins to show. The clear shape of a cave doorway cut straight into solid stone. At first, people thought it was only a trick of light in the dust. But the shadow did not move. It deepened. It formed an opening that led down beneath the river itself. Archaeologists stepped inside carefully, expecting to find broken pottery or small ruins. Instead, they walked into a massive underground chamber carved directly from the bedrock. Early carbon testing suggests parts of it may date back to around 2800 BCE, making it one of the oldest known structures in the region. But this was no simple place of worship. The walls are covered with carvings of tall, human-like figures. Their arms and legs are thin and stretched. Their eyes look doubled, almost layered on top of each other. Coiled shapes like serpents rest on their heads like crowns. At a glance, they resemble images of the Anunnaki from ancient Mesopotamian stories, yet these figures feel darker, leaner, more threatening than sacred. One message carved into the stone stands out. Though worn by time, it can still be read. It carries a warning that has survived thousands of years. When the river pulls back, the eye of the buried one opens. For generations, local villagers have repeated similar words. Many refuse to go near the site. Some say the structure was never meant to be found. This has led researchers to ask a disturbing question. Was this place built for worship, or to hold something inside? The book of Revelation speaks of 4 angels bound at the Euphrates until a chosen time. If that passage is symbolic, it is striking. If it is literal, it becomes far more serious. And now, as the river dries, the doorway stands open. When the excavation team finally broke through the last layer of packed stone and stepped into what seemed to be the temple's deepest room, they expected a shrine. Maybe a fallen altar or a place for offerings. What they found felt different. Not sacred, not welcoming. It felt designed. The chamber was carved from thick black basalt, a type of rock not found anywhere near the river. Tests suggested it had been brought from a distant volcanic region. The walls were smooth, too smooth, polished until they reflected light like dark glass. Yet, when touched, the stone felt unnaturally cold. Even after hours underground, the air inside the chamber stayed cooler than the burning desert above. At the center stood a sharp-edged stone altar, perfectly shaped, flanked by two tall pillars. Thin, metallic lines were fused into the stone itself. When magnets were placed near them, they reacted slightly, as if something conductive was hidden within. Careful measurements revealed something even stranger. The room's dimensions matched the Earth's axial precession cycle, roughly 26,000 years. The structure appeared to follow the movement of the heavens, not artistic balance. When sound frequencies near 110 Hz were played inside, the walls produced faint vibrations, as though the chamber answered back. In one corner, shallow channels carved into the floor guided liquid toward a central drain. Chemical tests showed high levels of iron, consistent with blood. The layout was not random. It was repeated, planned. Then came a discovery that changed the tone of the investigation. When ultraviolet light was swept across the northern wall, hidden markings began to glow. Symbols emerged in sharp blue lines, invisible to the naked eye. They formed the image of 4 winged beings, each figure bound at the wrists and ankles, encircled by rings of flame. The fire was carved in layered spirals, as if sealing them inside a burning boundary. Chains connected the 4 figures to a central point beneath the earth. The carvings were not decorative. They were instructional. On the same wall, relief images showed kneeling figures facing a horned shape rising from the ground. Above them was a circular star pattern unlike traditional Mesopotamian designs. Behind the altar, excavators uncovered a hidden stone sphere that emitted a faint magnetic field despite no visible power source. Embedded in a cracked wall panel was a stone tablet written in mixed script, part Sumerian, part Elamite, and part unknown. One sentence appeared 7 times, carved deeper than the rest. The watcher below must not be disturbed. On the reverse side, the Euphrates was shown splitting into 4 branches, circling a deep central pit. Each branch ended in symbols representing blood, fire, wind, and shadow. The Book of Revelation speaks of the great Euphrates River being dried up. It also describes angels bound until a specific hour. If those passages are symbolic, the similarity is striking. If they are literal, the meaning becomes heavier. Soon after the magnetic sphere was removed, equipment began to fail. Drones lost control within a short distance. GPS readings flickered. Ground radar returned distorted images, as if something beneath the chamber interfered with the signal. During the early hours of one morning, a recording device captured a deep, low-frequency sound, barely audible but steady. Hours later, the altar had shifted slightly from its original alignment. What began as a simple excavation has turned into something else entirely. Architecture, astronomy, ritual, and unexplained signals now meet beneath the drying bed of an ancient river. If this structure was built to honor something, it was unlike any known form of worship. But if it was built to hold something, then the most important question is no longer what was inside. It is whether it was meant to stay there. Roughly 3 weeks after the ritual mural inside the circular chamber had been fully recorded, a different kind of disturbance began to unfold. It was no longer about stone, symbols, or buried history. The disruption was modern, immediate, political. At the excavation site, engineers reported ongoing technical issues. Drones lost balance mid-flight, GPS units drifted several meters off position without warning. Satellite signals flickered, especially near the temple's central chamber. At first, specialists blamed the dense black basalt surrounding the structure. Magnetic minerals can interfere with electronics underground. That explanation seemed reasonable. But the pattern did not fade. It intensified. Ground-penetrating radar systems, operated by separate teams using different equipment, began returning conflicting depth readings. In several cases, the data appeared inverted, as if empty space registered as solid mass and solid stone appeared hollow. Calibration checks showed no clear fault. The anomalies repeated. Then, beyond the excavation site, another wave of reaction began, this time across international headlines. During a televised interview, Mike Huckabee spoke with Tucker Carlson and referenced the historical phrase describing land from the Nile to the Euphrates. The comment, framed in a theological and historical context, quickly spread across global media platforms. Within hours, officials and religious leaders across several Muslim-majority nations condemned the statement. Protests erupted in multiple cities. Government spokespeople described the phrase as provocative and destabilizing. Social media amplified the reaction, with commentators warning that such rhetoric could inflame already fragile tensions in the region. The coincidence was difficult to ignore. As the Euphrates River continued to recede, exposing an ancient chamber beneath its bed, political discourse once again circled around the very same river. What had been a remote archaeological story now intersected with geopolitics, faith, and territory. Some observers dismissed the timing as chance. Others noted how deeply symbolic the Euphrates remains in religious and historical imagination. It is not just a waterway. It has long represented a boundary, both physical and prophetic. At the site itself, tension rose quietly. Security presence increased. Access routes were restricted. Excavation reports were reviewed more carefully before release. Official statements emphasized scientific neutrality. Yet, beneath the surface, both in stone and in diplomacy, pressure was building. The radar anomalies continued. One technician described the readings as if something below was bending the signal. Another dismissed that interpretation as speculation. No clear cause was confirmed. Meanwhile, headlines focused on diplomatic fallout, emergency meetings, and calls for restraint. The phrase Nile to Euphrates moved from ancient scripture into modern debate. For many in the region, it carried historical wounds and fears of expansion. For others, it was a reference rooted in biblical narrative. Two worlds were now overlapping: an exposed chamber beneath a drying river, and a political storm rising above it. Whether coincidence or convergence, the timing sharpened every development. When ancient geography becomes part of modern rhetoric, interpretation grows heavier. The excavation had begun as a search for history. It was no longer only that. History is said to have begun in the Tigris-Euphrates basin. Some even believe it to be the location of the original Garden of Eden, or the ancient cradle of civilization in the Middle East. The Tigris and the Euphrates are born in modern Turkey, in the highlands where rain and snow are plentiful. The Euphrates is longer than the Tigris, flowing through Syria and Iraq to the head of the Gulf, where it joins the Tigris as the Shat A1 Arab. The Tigris has a greater total volume and flows directly from Turkey to Iraq, where it obtains additional flows from the Zagros Mountains of Iran. See map, page 25. The Tigris and the Euphrates lie in a transition zone between humid continental and desert climates. Like the Nile, they are exotic rivers, which derive their waters from outside the region through which they flow. The source of the Tigris/Euphrates system is in the highlands of eastern Anatolia, modern central Turkey, which receives large amounts of rain and snow. Most of the downstream region, modern Syria and Raq, receives insufficient rainfall to sustain rain-fed agriculture, but the rivers convey surplus water to zones of deficit. Farming first developed in the more humid zones, but then moved to river valleys in the arid zone, where crops could be grown under cultivation with the benefit of irrigation. As early as the 4th millennium BC, agricultural settlements and basic irrigation networks were part of the Mesopotamian landscape. A shocking transformation is happening in the Euphrates River. Its waters are drying up, revealing ancient secrets, just as the Bible foretold.
Actually fascinating about it is that the cloth that the statue is actually wearing is not made out of the same stone material, whereas the cloth is actual cloth that the statue...
At the same time, rivers worldwide are reportedly turning red. Sudden floods without storms, riverbanks collapsing in silence, animals vanishing before major shifts, and beneath the waters, discoveries no one expected to see. Scripture ties the drying of the Euphrates and water turning to blood to the end times and the release of the fallen angels. Could this be a natural event or a sign of divine judgment? Before we continue, please click the like and subscribe button so more people can uncover the truth behind these mysterious events. Strange events have been unfolding across the world. Numerous rivers have mysteriously turned red, leaving scientists and religious scholars searching for answers. Among them are the Rimac River in Peru, rivers in Lima, and most shockingly, the Euphrates River. The Euphrates River, one of the most historically and biblically significant bodies of water, has long been associated with end-time prophecies. The sudden change in its water color has sparked concern among believers who see this as a fulfillment of biblical warnings. But why is this happening? So, why is the river water turning red? Certain algae, such as Karenia brevis, can cause what is known as a red tide, producing toxins that are harmful to marine life and humans. These harmful algal blooms have been observed in various parts of the world, and while they may explain some cases of water turning red, they do not account for all occurrences, especially those happening in freshwater sources like the Euphrates River. While these scientific explanations provide potential reasoning for the phenomenon, many believe that the timing and specific locations of these events align too closely with biblical prophecy to be dismissed as mere coincidences. The Bible explicitly describes rivers turning red as a divine warning, often as a sign of judgment against those who have turned away from God. One of the most striking references is found in the book of Revelation. The third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. Revelation 16:4, NI. This event is eerily similar to the first plague in Egypt, when the Nile River was turned into blood as a direct act of divine intervention. And all the waters of the river were turned to blood. The fish in the Nile died, and the river smelled so bad that the Egyptians could not drink its water. Exodus 7:20-21. In both cases, Egypt and the end times, water sources become undrinkable, symbolizing God's power and warning humanity of impending doom. The question remains, are we now witnessing the fulfillment of this prophecy? The Euphrates River, in particular, holds a unique prophetic significance. The Bible speaks of the Euphrates drying up before the final battle of Armageddon. The sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Revelation 16:12, NY. With the Euphrates currently experiencing historic droughts and portions of it drying up, some prophecy watchers claim that this, along with the red-colored waters, is clear evidence that biblical warnings are unfolding before our eyes. If the recent reports of red-colored rivers are indeed a fulfillment of the third bowl judgment, then what happens next? According to the book of Revelation, divine wrath will escalate, leading to catastrophic consequences for humanity. These events will not be isolated incidents, but part of a chain reaction, each judgment more severe than the last. Before anyone sees movement, they hear it, a deep, low rumble, distant at first. It does not come from the sky, it comes from ahead, from the channel itself. The sound grows louder. Then the water appears. It races through the dry path that had stood empty only hours before. Within minutes, the cracked riverbed vanishes beneath violent, swirling current. Mud disappears, sandbars dissolve. The river surges forward with force. This does not feel like ordinary flooding. The ground nearby is dry. There has been no heavy rain upstream, no overnight storm strong enough to explain this power. The surge is sharp, direct, almost controlled. It moves as if something has been released, not poured down from above but pushed out from below. Later, experts offer explanations. Underground pressure systems, trapped aquifers breaking through weak rock, hidden channels shifting beneath the surface. Water can collect under layers of stone for years. Pressure can build where no one sees it. When the structure changes, through erosion or cracks, the release can come fast and hard. The science makes sense, but what unsettles people is not just how it happened, it is the order. First, the river turned blood. Then, without any sign in the sky, it overwhelmed with force. An ancient text once described a moment like this: "On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth." Genesis 7:11. In that account, the release did not begin with rain. It began from below. The deep opened before the clouds formed. What was hidden moved first. Whether someone reads that verse as history, symbol, or prophecy, the pattern is clear. Pressure builds in silence. Containment holds, until it does not. The Euphrates has always been more than a stream of water. It has marked the edge of empires. It has fed cities. It stands in prophetic language as a boundary of meaning. So, when a river like this first withdraws, then surges back without visible cause, people pause. Not in panic, in reflection. Because when water disappears and then erupts, the question is not whether underground systems exist, they do. The deeper question is about limits. How long had the pressure been building? What shifted beneath the surface? And if one layer gave way, what other hidden layers are under strain right now? Eventually, the surge slows. The water settles. The river returns to something that looks normal. But no one forgets the sequence. The river pulled back, and then it rushed forward. And anyone watching closely understood that something beneath the surface had shifted long before the surge became visible. Before we go further, like this video and share your thoughts below. Could this be a warning? The flood is exposing more than mud and stone. As the water pulls back again and parts of the riverbank shift, something new is now visible along a stretch of the Euphrates that used to stay underwater. It is not a cave torn open by a violent collapse. It is a narrow, dark opening, clean, sharp, almost precise, revealed where the soil has thinned and fallen away. An exploration team moves in carefully. They expect common rock walls, maybe broken pottery, maybe small fragments of history washed loose by the surge. Instead, they find something that changes the mood instantly. At the center of the chamber, resting on a flat stone slab, lies a massive ring. It is far too large for any normal human hand. 2 grown adults are needed to lift it. It is not shaped like jewelry. It does not look like part of a machine. It is thick, perfectly round, heavy, and solid. The weight suggests dense metal, not something hollow or decorative. What stands out even more is its condition. Despite clear signs of age and long exposure to moisture, there is almost no deep rust, no heavy corrosion, no crumbling edges. Ancient bronze and iron usually break down over time. This does not. The surface is worn, but intact. And then there is its position. The ring is not buried in mud. It is not tangled in debris carried by floodwater. It is placed. It sits squarely on a leveled stone pedestal, as if set there on purpose. The floor around it is calm and mostly undisturbed. There are no carvings on it, no letters, no symbols, no patterns. The inside is smooth, the outside is plain. It does not match known craftsmanship from Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, or Assyria. Early analysis cannot easily classify the metal within common ancient alloys. The silence of the object, the lack of markings, only deepens the mystery. This region is tied to ancient stories. In Genesis 6, the text speaks of the Nephilim, described as mighty men of old. Some see this as symbolism, others see it as literal history. Interpretations differ widely, but one simple question now stands in the chamber. If this ring was not made for a human hand, then whose hand was it made for? The size does not match ritual jewelry. It is too large to wear, too balanced to be broken architecture, too deliberately placed to be random. It does not clearly resemble a shackle. It does not clearly resemble an ornament. It remains undefined. What makes this discovery powerful is not fantasy. It is timing and location. It appears in a region already heavy with prophetic meaning. It surfaces only after strange water movement and underground pressure shifts. It rests alone, as if it had been waiting for the covering layers to weaken. The flood first forced people to look at what was happening beneath the earth. Now, the ring forces them to look at what may have been buried within history itself. If erosion reveals this object now, why now? Was it hidden on purpose? Was the cavern sealed long ago before rising waters covered it? Or is this simply the result of natural change uncovering what time had buried? One fact is clear. This is no longer just about unusual water behavior. The land is not only shifting, it is revealing. And if this is only the beginning of what lies beneath, stay with us. Because what was found deeper inside the cavern may challenge assumptions even further. Before the ground begins to move, and the animals are already leaving. Along wide sections near the Euphrates River, people are noticing something strange. The riverbanks, once full of life, feel empty. Birds that have nested in the same trees for years are gone. Their usual flight paths have shifted. Herd animals that used to graze close to the water are not coming back to their normal feeding spots. There are no fires, no heavy machines, no dead animals lying in the fields. Just absence. At first, this can be explained away. Animals move with the seasons. They follow food. They adjust to heat and cold. That is normal. But what troubles many locals is the timing. The animals begin to relocate before the ground shows clear signs of sinking. Before the riverbanks start to lower. Before cracks appear in the soil. The silence comes first. Science confirms that animals often sense change before humans do. They can feel shifts in air pressure. They detect tiny vibrations in the earth. They respond to underground gas releases and low, deep sound waves that people cannot hear. Certain species are extremely sensitive to frequencies and movement beneath the surface. History shows this pattern again and again. Before earthquakes, before volcanic eruptions, animals move. What feels sudden to humans has often been building quietly in the natural world. This pattern echoes a well-known biblical line. In Matthew 24:37, Jesus says, "As it was in the days of Noah." The statement is short but powerful. In the Genesis story, the animals enter the ark before the flood begins. The rain does not force them inside. Instinct does. They move before the disaster is visible. Movement comes before destruction. The focus in that story is not panic, It is preparation. The animals do not scatter wildly. They reposition. They shift because something unseen is approaching. Whether someone reads that account as history, symbol, or prophecy, the order is clear. Warning does not always come in words. Sometimes creation responds first. Near the river today, there is no official alert, no siren, no public statement. Yet the fields feel different, quieter. The skies hold fewer wings. Traditional grazing land is thinning out. It is not dramatic. It is controlled, subtle, almost gentle.
Do you hear that? Sounds like, is that wind?
the end, he finds a strange stone slab, which some viewers speculate could be linked to rituals.
Something that was spoken about 2,000 years ago is beginning to take shape, not in a city plaza, not on a stage, but in one of the most symbolically charged locations in all of Scripture. And just like before, the mainstream media is completely silent. As the Euphrates River receded, objects began to surface along the banks. Inside them, fragments of bone, arranged rather than discarded. Farther along the Euphrates, attention shifted upstream. Ancient cities once tied to the river's control began yielding evidence of intentional silence. Clay tablets scraped clean of writing. Corridors built not for movement, but for restriction. Skeletons arranged without honor, without ritual, without names. Scripture warns that when the Euphrates dries up, the final restraints of judgment will break. Do you see why this finding matters? Do you know why this specific time? Because when the layers begin to unfold timing, location, symbolism, you start to realize something unsettling. Stay with us, because we are no longer just studying prophecy as history or theory. We are watching it move quietly, precisely into the present. Picture this. The sun hasn't risen yet over the banks of the Euphrates River. The desert air is still cool, heavy with silence. The river, once wide and restless, lies unusually low, its surface barely moving in the dim light before dawn. Cliffs and ancient stone formations stand in shadow, watching, as they have for thousands of years. And then, just before sunrise, something breaks that silence. Not a storm, not machinery, something far more unsettling. Something has been warned about for decades. Something he claimed to have seen on the appointed day. Those words sat quietly in archives, in old recordings, in forgotten pages waiting for a moment like this. And here's what makes this moment impossible to ignore. The mainstream media won't touch it. No headlines, no breaking news alerts, and no warning came first. Just silence. Because this isn't easy to explain, and more importantly, it isn't easy to control. When people start paying attention to signs tied to Scripture, it forces uncomfortable questions about where history is headed. Stay with me until the very end of this video. I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened along the Euphrates and why it challenges everything we thought we understood about the timeline we're living in. And if you feel like you didn't find this video by accident, if something inside you says this moment matters, that's not coincidence. That's timing. Because what you're about to hear isn't meant to entertain you. It's meant to prepare you. Are you ready? Suddenly, snow began to form inside a newly discovered cave near the upper reaches of the Euphrates River. At the same time, thousands of miles away, the United States endured one of its harshest winter periods on record. Ancient writings described snow as more than weather. They spoke of it as something stored, held back, and released at appointed times. The book of Job asked a chilling question. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail? Snow was described as something reserved, not random. Poetic, yes, but poetry often preserves memory, and memory has a way of returning. No one claimed to understand it fully. No one announced a final meaning. But when snow appeared where it should not, and cold rose from places long sealed, people stopped to take notice. Why then? Why there? And why did it seem to echo events unfolding across the world at the same moment? History suggested that moments of unveiling rarely happened all at once. When barriers broke, whether water, ice, or time, what lay beneath appeared in stages. The cave opened. Ice formed. Storms spread. And if something as familiar as snow could surface where no one expected it, one quiet question remained. What else had been waiting for this exact moment to emerge? As the water receded along the riverbanks, other things began to surface, not ice, but discoveries that stopped people in their tracks. Along newly exposed sections of the river's edge, survey teams began noticing ceramic vessels partially embedded in hardened silt. At first glance, they looked like ordinary storage jars, cracked by time and pressure, but as more sediment was cleared away, the pattern became impossible to dismiss. These were not scattered debris. They were placed deliberately, spaced with intention, and oriented in the same direction. Inside the jars were small fragments of bone, not complete skeletons, but carefully arranged pieces, not dumped, not broken by force, set inside the vessels as if preserved or contained. Some jars held only a few fragments. Others contained more, layered carefully rather than piled. What unsettled investigators most was the exterior of the pottery itself. Wrapped around each vessel was a raised serpent figure molded directly into the clay. The snake did not appear painted or added later. It was formed as part of the jar, its body circling the vessel, looping upward, enclosing it. In several cases, the serpent's head was positioned near the rim, mouth closed, eyes defined, as if guarding what lay inside. There were no inscriptions, no names, no markers identifying individuals, tribes, or dates. These were not burial urns in any known funerary tradition. They did not match domestic storage practices, and they did not resemble offerings commonly associated with temples or shrines. The combination bones sealed in jars, encircled by a serpent, suggested something else entirely: containment, warning, or ritual restriction. Researchers noted that the jars were sealed tightly, some with fitted lids hardened by mineral deposits, implying they were never meant to be reopened. Whatever purpose they served, it was not remembrance, it was separation. No one claims to know exactly who placed them there, or why. No one claims these remains belong to anything extraordinary. But history shows that ancient cultures often used symbols, especially animals like the serpent, to represent ideas they could not fully explain: danger, boundary, corruption, or forbidden knowledge. And as these jars emerged from the riverbed at the same time as other unusual exposures and disruptions, the question shifted. Not what they were, but why they were hidden so carefully, and why the river chose now to give them back. Near Mount Ararat, a boat-shaped formation had rested on the mountainside for decades. For years, it drew little attention. Then interest returned. The structure became known as the Duru Pinar Formation. At first glance, its outline stood out. Long, curved, balanced. Its size closely matched the dimensions described for the Ark in the Book of Genesis. It did not look shattered or random. It looked deliberate. Ground-penetrating radar later revealed what lay beneath. Inside the formation were layered sections and long corridors, arranged in repeating patterns. They resembled stacked decks rather than solid rock. The interior was ordered, not chaotic. Soil tests added to the unease. The ground showed elevated levels of organic material and potassium markers more consistent with long-term decay of biological matter than ordinary stone. A similar detail appeared farther south, near Mount Judy. Local accounts described hardened structures embedded in the slope, aligned in straight segments rather than broken fragments. Stone layers there showed unusual symmetry. Like Ararat, the site drew attention not because of size alone, but because of form. The book of Genesis recorded a brief but weighty statement. "And the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat." Genesis 8-4. Once again, Mount Ararat is making headlines. Researchers in Turkey now claim to have found indisputable evidence that Noah's Ark is not just a cautionary tale, but a verifiable historical event. But the real question is, have they truly found it? In reality, there is reason for skepticism. The famous Durupinar site has been meticulously studied by experts like geologist Dr. Andrew Snelling. Their conclusion? It isn't a boat, it's a natural geologic formation. Let's look at the biblical record. The Great Book states, "The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat plural," not necessarily on the specific peak of Mount Ararat itself. Furthermore, geological evidence suggests that Mount Ararat is a volcanic cone formed after the global flood. How do we know? The mountain sits atop thousands of feet of sediment filled with marine fossils. This means the floodwaters had already receded before the volcano even began to erupt and take shape. Even if the ark had landed there, it would have been decimated by subsequent volcanic activity. Ultimately, this isn't just about archaeology. It's about a person's worldview. An atheist once remarked, "Even if you found a giant ship on that mountain and dragged it through the streets, I still wouldn't believe." When someone is committed to rejecting the message, no amount of evidence is ever enough. This echoes the story in Luke 16. If people refuse to listen to the foundations already laid, they won't be persuaded, even if someone were to rise from the dead. It proves that the rejection of truth is often a spiritual issue, not a lack of evidence. We've heard, "The ark has been found," so many times over the years that many have become immune to the claim. But we don't need a wooden relic to prove the truth. The evidence of the flood is written in the earth itself, in the vast layers of sediment and fossils that cover our globe. The Great Flood itself was not described as chance or chaos. Scripture presented it as judgment after long warning. Water rose because order had been abandoned. Yet even in judgment, preservation remained. The ark was not only an ending, it was restraint. Finding the ark would undoubtedly be the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. But our faith doesn't depend on it. From the very beginning, the heavens and the earth have declared the glory of a Creator. The evidence is all around us. He has made it evident to all. As the water continued to recede, the story did not end along the exposed riverbanks. It carried us upstream, to another place bound to the Euphrates River, a site where history feels intentionally muted rather than forgotten. The trail leads to Mari, an ancient city that once controlled trade, movement, and communication along the Euphrates. Here, excavations have revealed hundreds of deliberately altered artifacts. These were not broken by collapse or erosion. They were selectively damaged. Clay tablets were found intact in form, yet their inscriptions had been carefully scraped away. The goal was not destruction but erasure. Information removed, objects left behind, memory silenced, not shattered. Beneath overlapping layers of palace ruins and administrative buildings, archaeologists began uncovering narrow, concealed corridors. These passages do not connect living quarters. They do not lead to temples, courtyards, or ceremonial spaces. In fact, they lead nowhere useful at all. Their placement is wrong for daily life. Their dimensions are wrong for transport, which suggests They were not built for movement, but for containment. Deeper still, investigators encountered a chilling scene. Rows of skeletons arranged with precision, lacking any recognizable burial rites. No offerings, no markers, no signs of honor or mourning. The remains were positioned uniformly, as if the individuals had been processed rather than buried, reduced to components of a larger, impersonal system. In a separate section of the site, informally referred to by researchers as a sealed chamber, evidence of deliberate restriction became even clearer. Mineral layers had been applied to entrances. Stone closures were reinforced, not with haste, but with care.